Greetings. Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic
Heading homeward from Rivendell, 4 hobbits and an old wizard. Frodo seemed a bit ill at ease. He couldn't bring himself to cross the ford of Bruinen. Gandalf asks if he's in pain. Frodo replies his shoulder aches and the memory of darkness is heavy. It was a year ago that day, the attack on Weathertop. I don't like merely quoting Tolkien, but sometimes it's necessary. Gandalf says, quote, "Alas, there are some wounds that cannot be wholly cured." "I fear it may be so with mine," said Frodo. "There's no real going back. Though I may come to the Shire, I will not seem the same. For I shall not be the same. I am wounded with knife, sting, and tooth, and a long burden. Where shall I find rest?" Unquote. Once again, the oft-asked question, why did Frodo leave Middle-earth, is neatly answered. People, don't put faith in the movie. Read the book. It will answer most of your questions. The next day, the pain subsided, and Frodo was back to his old self. He did, however, beg the company to hasten past Weathertop, and he would not even look at the hill. That night, the weather changed, and a chill wind came from the west, laden with rain. They approached Bree on an evening similar to that one a year ago, windy, rainy, and cold. They came to the south gate. It was locked fast. They had expected more welcome. They called out many times, and at last the gatekeeper came out, fearful and suspicious. He carried a great cudgel. But when he saw that Gandalf was there and that his companions were hobbits, he brightened and wished them welcome. "We won't stay for news out here in the cold and the wet, but old Barley will no doubt give you a welcome at the pony, and there you'll hear all there is to hear." They passed through, and then they noticed that behind the hedge at the roadside, a long, low hut had been built, and a number of men had come out and were staring at them over the fence. They came to Bill Ferny's house and saw that the hedge there was unkempt, and the windows were all boarded up. "You think you killed him with that apple?" said Pippin. "I'm not so hopeful, Mr. Pippin," said Sam. "But I'd like to know what happened to that poor pony." They came at last to the prancing pony, and that, at least, looked outwardly unchanged. They rang the bell, and Nob came to the door, opened it a crack, and peeped through. He saw them standing under the lamp. He gave a cry of surprise. "Mr. Butterbur! Master!" he shouted. "They've come back!" Butterbur came with a rush and had a club in his fist. But when he saw who they were, he stopped short, and the black scowl on his face changed to wonder and delight. "Nob, you ninny!" he cried. "Can't you give old friends their names? You shouldn't go scaring me like that. I never expected to see any of you folks again, and that's a fact." He continued for a while. Butterbur, at any rate, had not changed his manner of talking. He still seemed to live in his old breathless bustle. Come in, come in! The same rooms as before? They're free. Indeed, most rooms are empty these days. I'll see what can be done about supper as soon as may be. Well, Bob's gone. He goes home to his folk at nightfall now. Well, take the guests' ponies to the stables, Nob, and you'll be taking your horse to his stable yourself, Gandalf, I don't doubt. Well, come in. Make yourselves at home. There was hardly anybody about, and all was quiet. From the common room there came a low murmur of no more than 2 or 3 voices. And seen closer in the light of 2 candles that he lit and carried before them, the landlord's face looked rather wrinkled and careworn. He led them down the passage to the parlor that they had used on that strange night more than a year ago. As they expected, Mr. Butterbur came to the parlor after supper to see if all had been to their liking. As indeed it had. No change for the worse had come yet to the beer or the victuals at the Pony, at any rate. Now, I won't make so bold as to suggest you come to the common room tonight, said Butterbur. But if you could spare me half an hour before you go to your beds, I would dearly like to have some talk with you, quiet-like, by ourselves. That is just what we should like, too, said Gandalf. We were wet, cold, and hungry, but all that you have cured. Come, sit down, and if you have any pipeweed, we'll bless you. Well, if you'd called for anything else, I'd have been happier, said Butterbur, lamenting the shortage. We've only got what we grow ourselves, and that's not enough. There's none to be had from the Shire these days. More foreshadowing? But I'll do what I can. He left and returned shortly, bringing them enough to last a day or 2. A wad of uncut leaf. South Lynch, he said, the best we have. Not the match for South Farthing, as I've always said, though I'm all for brie in most matters, begging your pardon. They talked for many times half an hour, and exchanged all such news as Mr. Butterbur wished to hear or give. Most of the things which they had to tell were a mere wonder and bewilderment to their host, and far beyond his vision. But he did say much on his own account. Business was bad. The locals were keeping themselves locked in their houses, and no one was coming from outside, except more gangrels, as Butterbur called them, that had started coming up from the south over a year ago. There was a real set-to around the new year, ending with 5 Brelanders killed. Harry at the gate and Bill Fernie joined the Southerners and were driven off into the woods with the rest. Pippin observed that no one bothered them out in the wild. Butterbur pointed out that they were armed. The bandits wouldn't go after them. Gandalf laughed. Well, well, he said, if they are afraid of just 5 of us, they will give you peace at night while we stay. How long will that be, said Butterbur. We're not used to such troubles. The Rangers have all gone away, folk tell me. I don't think we've rightly understood till now what they did for us. Gandalf said, cheer up, Barlaman. You have been on the edge of very great troubles. Then he reported that the Rangers had returned, and that the Greenway would again be conveying respectable travelers under the king, and the evil things will be driven out of the wastelands. Butterbur shook his head. If there's a few decent, respectable folk on the road, well, that won't do no harm, he said. But we want to be let alone. You will be let alone, Barlaman, said Gandalf. There was so much open country out there that no one would have to come anywhere near Bree. He spoke of the far north, which was now returned to the king. And the king will come again here one day. And then you'll have some fair folk riding through. Well, that sounds more hopeful, said Butterbur. And it would be good for business, no doubt, so long as he lets Bree alone. Gandalf stuns Butterbur by identifying the king as Strider. The eyes in his broad face grew round, and his mouth opened wide, and he gasped. "Strider?" he exclaimed when he got his breath back. "Him with a crown and all, and a golden cup? Well, what are we coming to?" "Better times, for Bree at any rate," said Gandalf. "I hope so, I'm sure," said Butterbur. "I'm for bed, and I've no doubt you'll be glad of your beds too. Hey, Nob," he called, going to the door. "Nob, you slow coach." "Nob," he said to himself, slapping his forehead. What does that remind me of? Nob, stables. Ah, that was it. Sam's beloved Bill had found his way home from Moria. A little raggedy, but doing fine under Nob's care. Sam would not go to bed until he had visited Bill in the stable. The travelers stayed at Bree all the next day, and Mr. Butterbur could not complain of his business next evening, at any rate. Curiosity overcame all fears, and his house was crowded. Bree memories being retentive, Frodo was asked many times if he had written his book. He answered that he was going home to put his notes in order. Then one of the younger folk called for a song, but at that a hush fell, and he was frowned down. And the call was not repeated. Then, again, it was time to leave. The hobbits wanted to reach Shire before nightfall, and the weather was still rainy. The Bree folk were all out to see them off, and were in a merrier mood than they had been for a year. "Well, good luck on your road, and good luck to your homecoming," said Mr. Butterbur. "I should have warned you before that all's not well in the Shire either, if what we hear is true. But you've come back changed from your travels, and you look now like folk who can deal with troubles out of hand. Good luck to you." They rode away and passed through the west gate and on towards the Shire. Bill the pony was with them, and as before he had a good deal of baggage, but he trotted along beside Sam and seemed well content. The hobbits pondered Barlaman's warning. Sam was reminded of the devastation he saw in Galadriel's mirror, in the book only, of course, and wishes they had headed home sooner. And the pipeweed shortage. Pippin opines Lotho Sackville Baggins is at the bottom of it all. And Gandalf disagrees. Deep in, but not at the bottom. He reminds them of Saruman's interest in the Shire. They reach the point where Gandalf needs to explain that he's leaving them, and why. He says he's not coming to the Shire. The hobbits must settle its affairs themselves. It is no longer his task to set things to rights. He tells them he's going to have a nice long talk with Tom Bombadil. Movie viewers have no idea who Bombadil is. Read the book! In a little while, they came to the point in the East Road where they had taken leave of Bombadil. Frodo says he'd like to see old Tom again. Gandalf urges the hobbits onto the Brandywine Bridge, quote, before the gates are locked. Merry objects, but there aren't any gates. There weren't any gates, you mean, said Gandalf. I think you will find some now. But you'll manage all right. Goodbye, dear friends. And he rode off. And there they were, just the four that started out together, returning home together. Once again, our mortal enemy, the clock, is turned against us. I want to finish this up as quickly as possible, but presenting it as completely, this is practical. There's a lot of the original story that Jackson just tore up and threw in the trash. As of right now, it looks like another 6 episodes. I've said before, to include all this, or even a large portion of it, would require another 4-hour movie. And sadly, that's just not realistic. However, Jackson could have done better than just lopping off the entire end of the book, though. There's a lot of time wasted on scenes that were totally irrelevant and not even in the original text. So, until we meet again, thanks for watching. Check some of the other episodes. They work better if viewed in sequence. I tend to take different approaches to the story from time to time. Do all the comment, like, subscribe stuff, or better yet, buy me a coffee.